Thank you for checking out the Long Run Podcast. Let's be honest, life is hard, and it can sometimes be just as confusing as it is exciting. Whether you're gearing up for your first job, preparing for a new semester of college, searching for a spouse, or you're just working to pay off your debt. As you jump life's hurdles, you can easily begin to lose sight of what race you're even running. Our heart behind this podcast is to help you make your life count in the long run of eternity by discussing how to passionately love Jesus and follow Him daily. With that being said, here's the next episode of the Long Run Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Long Run Podcast. I kind of just started up there. Did you like that?
That's great.
You weren't even ready for it.
No.
Robbie, you outdressed me today here. Those of you who are not on video, I'm sorry if you're listening, just audio. Robbie is wearing the blue polo shirt, and I'm sure you have Kohans on under the table.
You know it.
Do you really?
Always.
For those of you who know Robbie, that's all he wears. But yeah, and I'm rocking a Memphis Tigers t-shirt, but no big deal. Robbie, welcome to the Long Run Podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here.
It's good to have you. What did I tell you? I told you fist away from the microphone, and you look like you're an arm length away. I could put a tape measure there and get about a foot.
I got to adjust. This is my first time on here, you know.
I promise
you're a pro.
I promise I'm going to stop picking on you halfway through. Robbie, you're our first guest of Season 3. Now, who is Robby Flack, you're wondering? Well, don't click off just yet. Let's hear his Twitter-linked bio. He's a husband, a father, Downline Emerging Leaders Director. That's a mouthful. And outdoorsman.
There you go. I didn't really even know what a Twitter length bio is, so hopefully that.
Do you have a Twitter?
The question. I do, but I probably haven't tweeted in like 7 years.
How old are you again?
34.
You said that with confidence.
Hey.
I did check you the other day about your age when you couldn't figure out how to like turn on the iPhone recording. Yeah, you said, well, how do you record with these things? You couldn't find the voice recording. You know what? I'm going to stop picking on you. It's too easy because then I feel like you're going to come out of left field and really like give me a right hook.
You just wait. I got to get into it, and then you never know what's coming.
You're going to give me a right hook on my own podcast, which would be detrimental to me and my fame that I get from this because that's why I do it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, look, real quick, just a little bit about Robbie. Me and you actually met this summer at a Mexican restaurant where all good relationships start, right?
That's right.
Las Delicious. You know it's delicious.
Yeah. That wasn't that long ago.
It was like, what month was it?
Probably June.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, you're the Downline Emerging Leaders Director, which I've kind of thrown around the word Downline and Downline Ministries in the past few episodes because I'm actually going through the program. So I'm sure you're going to talk a little bit about that and hit on what exactly that is and how that falls into your story as we talk today. But
somehow I managed to brainwash you into signing up for Downline, which is, so far so good, I would say. But
well, you buy a kid Mexican food and tell him he can learn more about Jesus. And I heard $350 rent is what I heard too, and I was like, I think this is God's will for my life.
You can't do much better than $350 rent.
I'm always quoting The Office, but I think Cliff quoted this one the other episode. I feel God in this Mexican restaurant right now.
In this Chili's.
Yeah, I feel God in this Chili's right now.
That's a good Office line.
But yeah, Robbie's a solid guy. For you those who don't know him, which is probably a lot of people listening to this podcast. Robbie, he's the EL director. You were born in Washington State, right?
Well, yeah. I was actually born in Indiana, lived in Washington State, lived in New York State for a while, and I have spent most of my time in Kansas. So I kind of was raised in Kansas.
Well, I'm sure you haven't got this one yet, but you're not in Kansas anymore.
I've never gotten that before. I don't know what you're talking about.
But yeah, so you spent a lot of your life in Kansas, moved to Memphis. We'll get into all of that. But just a little bit about Robbie. Like I said, a lot of y'all don't know Robbie. I'm getting to know Robbie as well, but I will give you a few compliments. You do live your life, for the gospel. I've seen that. You definitely, I love, because you got outdoorsman in your bio. I love that. But you have a few different hobbies. What are some hobbies that you have?
I have a lot of different hobbies. My wife calls me Hobby Robbie. It's like one of her nicknames for me because I have so many things that I try to do. But outside of like ministry and life and family, hunting and anything outdoors. So hiking, mountain biking, running, working out. pretty into photography these days, and that kind of combines like those passions. So I take photos of hunting and all that stuff.
You just went elk hunting over in Oregon, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
With a buddy?
Me and a buddy that I actually knew from Kansas. He lives out in Portland, so we did some elk and deer hunting.
Pretty cool.
But yeah, anytime I can get out and get out into the outdoors and do some hunting, especially this in the winter, about to be hunting season, so about to get into it.
For sure. That's awesome. Hey, a lot of your talents, and you have some expertise in hunting and everything. You went to Kansas State University, got your undergrad in
political science and economics.
All right, for you college students listening, your degree will not determine your future.
Yep, that is right.
So you did that, then you went and got a Master of Theology from Southern Seminary.
I just recently graduated from Southern Seminary with a master's in theology.
Congratulations. Awesome. Glad we have you on here because you know everything now. I have so many questions.
Any theology questions, just, hit me up with them. I'm sure I can answer them with 100% certainty.
Robby Flack at downlineministries.com. But I will give you this, Robby. So, you have a bunch of different hobbies, but one thing when I think of you, which I haven't known you for that long, but the example that I see you set for the other guys, and I'm sure women, going through Downline, because you're the EL director, and then we have another director who's over the women. Y'all work hand in hand beside each other. But what I see you doing is your things that you involve with, that you like to do, enjoy God's creation. You know how to loop guys in, that enjoy the same thing, and take that time where you could just do that by yourself. You could go shoot archery by yourself, practice bow hunting by yourself, but you try to loop in guys, or shoot basketball, and you try to do that with guys to maximize your time and to maximize disciple making and discipleship and investing your life, which you've done with me when, we'll go out there and practice archery. Well, you practice archery. I practice finding my arrows
over the target into the dirt, and then we go find them.
How many did I lose last week?
Probably too many.
It was literally two.
Yeah. But that is something that I feel like I'm not naturally all that good at. I'm kind of an introvert, and I like my alone time, but I think just in order to try to impact people, I want to involve them with my life as much as possible. So anything that I'm doing, whether that's working out, hobbies, anything, that I just talked about, I try to do that with other people as much as I can.
So that's weird because I know people naturally, whatever they are, and don't even get me started on these dang Enneagrams. We're not even going there. But you said you're naturally an introvert. Yeah. So why are you putting yourself out there or trying to, of course we need to share the gospel with people, but we're just talking about spending time with guys. And it's kind of your job too, but you stepped into a ministry role, which is a very people-centric, vocation. So why are you putting yourself out there if you're naturally an introvert?
Yeah, well, I think it's something, like I said, I've intentionally tried to grow in. I think I just realized early on, especially in college, as I started to take on some leadership, I just think I saw that in order to lead, you had to build relationships with people, and that's the currency of leadership. And I think I just saw that being more and more important, so I just intentionally have gotten out of my comfort zone a lot of times. I still, I need to refuel alone and reading and, running. And some of those things are things that refuel me, but I really see, especially when it comes to just my walk with the Lord and making disciples, as obviously we'll get into, but I just think you can't do that in isolation. So I think in order to just honestly just be obedient to what Jesus has called me to do, it is always going to involve other people.
That's interesting. And you said you learned that say it one more time, that people are the currency to
leadership.
Man, that's like a sermon.
I don't know. I kind of just made that up.
Oh, well, that was good. I'm glad we prayed before. That was the Lord's words.
Yep.
So did you learn that you did not campus outreach? It's called
STUMO, yeah. Student mobilization. It's a college ministry, very similar to campus outreach, but I was in Kansas. I was involved with them at Kansas State, and then I went on staff for 4 years at University of Kansas.
I can just hear the regret in your voice when you say, but I was in Kansas then. And now I'm in Memphis. Because Memphis is the move.
I enjoy both
baby.
Places.
So is that when you learned that? That kind of, I guess, the essence of leadership and investing in people? Was that when you learned it, when you were doing college ministry, right out of college?
Yeah. that was hugely developmental for me. I can actually remember a moment. So there was a summer project that we would do, and it would be down in Gulf Shores, and we'd spend the summer living with other guys, helping them grow spiritually. And I was what's called a discipleship group leader, a D group leader, the summer after I graduated from college, before I went on staff. And I just remember having a moment. I was leading 4 other guys that were, in college, trying to grow in their faith. And we spent like literally almost every second of the day together, like living together on top of each other, just in this little condo in Gulf Shores.
Darn, sounds exciting.
But I just kind of remember having like this light bulb moment where I realized like this is what it looks like to make disciples. It's like spending time with people, praying together, reading the word together, just like hearing sermons, hearing teaching together, processing that, talking about the future, like just spending a whole bunch of time together and like trying to bring Christ into that and helping people grow. And I just remember thinking like, man, this is awesome. Like I want to spend my life doing this in whatever context that looks like. Obviously the ministry, the job, if you will, has changed. And obviously it's something that you can do outside of, working in full-time ministry. I was like to talk about how, every believer is in full-time ministry. Some people will do it vocationally.
Right.
Most won't. But that's great because we need disciple makers in literally every vocation possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, back up. Hold on. You've thrown around the word disciple like I think 12,000 times. Granted, I said it first, so I'm not even going to attack you again.
I should make you define discipleship because I think that's what you're about to make me do.
I'm not about to I'm getting tongue-tied. No, I'm going to say you've mentioned that a bunch. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's one of the biggest things that's influenced your walk with Christ and like who you are? It sounds like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I honestly don't really know what it looks I think this is true. I don't really know what it looks like to follow Christ outside of disciple making. Because, and I'll say that for a couple of reasons, but one would be I was personally impacted in college in my walk with God. Like I started to grow as this guy named Justin, who was another member of my fraternity that was a follower of Christ, and he actually was the first person to disciple me, meaning we met up and we read the Bible together, we prayed together, we memorized scripture together, and that was like the context for me of what spiritual growth looked like. And for the first time I really like had a heart that was awakened to the gospel, and just the word came alive, and like everything that he taught me or other people taught me just became real, I guess, and like impactful. So I started in that, and then like I said, I had the opportunity to start to turn around and impact other guys. But yeah, I mean, for me, following Christ is all about, how can I get up under other people, other men especially, who can help me and train me to grow, and in whatever context that is, whether that's ministry, marriage, just personal walk with God, and then how can I turn around and invest in other guys and help them, reproduce their lives as well.
Right. So this Justin guy, he comes up to you and approaches you to study the Bible together. But who was Robby Flack before that? I mean, obviously not the same guy I'm sitting across from today.
Yeah.
But what's your background? Did you like grow up like regularly attending church? Like, did your dad and mom make you go to church?
Yeah. Well, my dad's actually a pastor. So that's one of the reasons we moved around to all those places I mentioned, is he was working in different churches, and then he took over as a lead pastor at a church in Manhattan called Grace Baptist, and he was there for like 20 years.
Manhattan, Kansas.
That's
right.
Let's
clarify that.
Yeah, it's called the Little Apple.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's known as the happiest place on earth, if you didn't know.
Are you messing with me
no,
right
it's
now?
for real.
I can't tell when you're lying. I can't tell when you're being sarcastic.
Yeah. And it's a football reference. We've been decent at football in the past.
Oh,
so,
really? Is that where you went to high school, Manhattan?
I went to Riley County High School, just outside Manhattan.
All right, you're losing me now.
Well, and then I went to Kansas State, but I grew up in Manhattan. Yeah, so you were asking about family growing up. But my dad was a pastor. So, I mean, we were always at church. Like, we were the first ones there, last ones to leave. I enjoyed it. And then I think, honestly, when I got to college, I just embraced the world and really wanted to be successful, get really good grades, take on a lot of leadership, like set myself up for a good career. Those were my main things that I was pursuing in college. And so I went really hard after that.
Fun fact, you interned tell about where you interned. That's cool.
Yeah, I was a political science major. I really wanted to work in politics, honestly, which might sound funny to some people, but I loved DC. I got to go intern for Senator Roberts from Kansas.
Pretty cool.
After my junior year, spent a summer in DC, and really actually wanted to go back to DC after graduation and work. That was kind of my leading option at the time, what I wanted. And then life kind of got turned upside down a little bit for me when I really began to follow Christ as a senior.
How did that happen?
So a couple different things. It wasn't just like one person. It wasn't like Justin just came up and shared the gospel with me. He was actually my roommate. He was my pledge son in the fraternity. And so we lived together for, I think, a year and a half. And honestly, I just watched him live out the Christian life in front of me. I saw him read his Bible in the morning. I saw him, build relationships with other guys in the house. He was one of the most liked members of the fraternity. I saw him share the gospel. Like, he would literally be in our room, like, drawing out the gospel on a piece of paper with one of the other guys in the fraternity. And so I watched him do all that. And at the end of the day, I think I just saw his life and I saw my life and I said, man, our lives look nothing alike. Like, I'm chasing all these things of the world and he's chasing Christ and trying to make him known. And our lives look so different. And so we just kind of started talking about that, processing through that. And I finally just got to the point where I was like, man, nothing that I've sought after has satisfied, fulfilled. I'm always looking for the next thing. Like, what's the next thing? And so I finally just got to the point where I was like, I don't know what this following Jesus thing that you're doing looks like, but I want to be a part of it.
Right.
And so I went to him and that's kind of when we started meeting and started studying the Bible together. And there was a few other guys in the fraternity that were doing it at the same time. One of my best friends, a guy named, we call him Rogie. His name's David Rogan Mosier. We call him Rogie for short, but he actually started following Christ right at the same time. And so we started hanging out a ton, and we were actually kind of enemies in the fraternity before. And then, cause he's kind of a troublemaker.
Oh, is that right? Darn Rogie.
Yeah.
With a name like that, you're not going to
He was the ringleader of all of the troublemakers in the fraternity. And at the time I was the president of the fraternity. So I was trying to enforce the rules. He was trying to break as many as possible. So, but we actually became Christians like at the same time, and then we just became best friends. And I remember walking into his room that I'd probably been into like twice ever and being like, hey, do you want to read the Bible together? And he kind of looked at me funny and he was like, oh yeah, sure, it sounds good. And so we just like started reading every day, and we just grew a ton through that. I think that's like those guys looking back for those couple years in college. I mean, massive blessing on my life, like huge gift from the Lord. So that's been huge.
So you talk about making disciples and Justin, taking the initiative, asking you to sit down, study the Bible together, and then you kind of go into Rogie and y'all getting together and doing the same thing. So how would you find, I feel like it's such a buzzword in church today, make disciples, discipleship. Like, where do we see it laid out in Scripture? What does it mean to even like make disciples? I know that's a lot, but just brushing over it from 1,000-foot view, what would you say?
Yeah. Well, there's probably three things I would say scripture-wise. For me, you look at the life of Jesus and you look at, just what he spent his time doing. He spent it with 12 guys, like 80% of his time with 12 guys, which if you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Like, he was here on earth for 3 years, and yes, he taught, yes, he healed. Yes, he was by himself sometimes, but the majority of his time was spent with the 12 disciples, just like teaching them, talking to them, processing through things that they were struggling with, which I think is a pretty cool example for us. We're supposed to follow, like Paul says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Like, if we're supposed to be following the example of Christ, like, we should be investing intentionally in other people. Yeah. So I think that's where you see it first and foremost. Books like Master Plan of Evangelism by Robert Coleman lay that out really, really solid, if you want more information on that. And I think the other two things I would say is the book of 2 Timothy is huge. It's been my favorite book ever since, college for me, because I think it lays out discipleship so clearly. 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul says to Timothy, like, the things you have heard me say, and trust to faithful men who will be qualified to teach others also. So you see the intentionality of Paul pouring into Timothy, who will then pour into reliable men who will be able to teach others also, so you see 4+ generations right there of disciple making.
Yeah.
And then kind of like a real key verse, 1 Thessalonians 2:8 talks about how it's like, it basically says like, we loved you so much, we shared the gospel and our lives with you as well.
Yeah.
So it talks about how discipleship is, obviously truth, teaching people, but it's done in the context of a loving relationship between people. So the life part as well. So in short, that's kind of where that's like first, where I would take people first and foremost.
Yeah. And I want to be careful about my next question. That was good, by the way. It was really good. I want to be careful about my next question because I don't always just want to like pick on the church and say the church does this wrong, the church does that wrong. It's the bride of Christ, need to be careful. But on the flip side, hold it accountable because it's just the people of Christ. We hold each other accountable. And we're not the judge and juror of where the majority of churches in America, because we're speaking for America because it's kind of, or the Bible Belt even, because that's what we know. But would you say a majority of churches in our area, Bible Belt, what we've seen, what we're used to, like American Christianity, do you think they're doing like a good job of making disciples and I guess following the Great Commission? Or like, what have we seen that's been common, but maybe we're changing and like saying, oh, this is like the actual way we need to do it? Do you feel like there's kind of that going on?
Well, I mean, I would start by saying, I think by the grace of God, we're seeing more and more examples of intentional disciple making happen in the church and movements of churches making disciple. But I would still say, and I think most people would agree with this if they kind of look at the Western church, the American church, that disciple making really isn't a huge priority in the church today. I think we've been in kind of a church growth movement, which I think we kind of see is starting to pass a little bit. And
explain that, like, what do we see the church doing versus what we kind of should be doing?
Yeah.
And I know we want to be careful here, but just generally.
And it's, we're obviously speaking a little bit in generalities, but I think you can divide people's view and vision of the church into, kind of answering what is the goal or the primary responsibility of the church. And I think some people would say it's to reach the lost, and some people would say it's to build up believers or to grow believers. And I think the church growth model of how can you attract the lost people into your church through making it really relevant, really trendy a lot of times, has primarily said the church is about attracting and evangelizing lost people, which is obviously a good and great thing. We want to see people come to know Christ
for sure.
But I would say biblically, the primary responsibility of the church is to prepare God's people for doing the ministry themselves, or to help Christians mature.
Right.
And I think that's what disciple making is. And so I think I would love to see churches focus on how do we equip our members to feed themselves spiritually, to grow, to like flourish in their personal walk with Christ, and then how do they then go out into whatever context they're in and reach the lost people around them with the gospel and make disciples out in the world.
Right. And we're not saying motives are generally bad. We're just saying, because you just identified two different strategies, the same goal to reach and save the lost, but two different strategies: bring in or go out, bring in, versus what is it? Send out, just send out. There was like a graph or something I saw on a paper recently, but yeah, and so like you're talking about, the goal was to have or the heart eventually for the church members, for them to spiritually be able to feed themselves and to go and make disciples themselves. What does that look like for a church member? Does that mean they have to teach a Sunday school class? We need to just create a bunch of Sunday school teachers. Does that mean you need to go and lead devotions in a high school? Like, what does that? I'm an accountant, and everybody's got different schedules and lives. If you're a dad working 60 hours a week, how you go about doing the work of the ministry is a whole lot different than if you own your own business or if you're a traveling salesman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, and I like to keep things simple. So I just like to think about how do I, wherever God's placed me in the context of my life, how can I take the truths of Scripture and pass them on to the people around me? And that's maybe oversimplifying it, because there are specific, people, maybe a father of, 6 kids or something may not have the same capacity that like a single guy might to have, all these different relationships.
Right.
But I think first and foremost, discipleship starts in the home. So I would say, man, disciple those kids, like pass on the truth of God's word to your kids. Like that's your primary responsibility.
That speaks to the stay-at-home moms too, because maybe a lot of times, people do this. You go into theology at work, kind of like what we talked about last week. Oh, my job, what I'm doing now is not important because I'm not a pastor or whatever. Well, the stay-at-home mom feeling like her job's not unimportant, but honestly, that's your most important job. Discipling your children, raising those children. Yeah, and just to back up a second, like one of the things that I think is like one of the beautiful things about disciple making is it gives every single follower of Christ, regardless of the context of their life, it gives them this overarching purpose of I can be a part of the Great Commission. I can be a part of living out the last command that Jesus ever gave us by passing on, the gospel and my life to other people. So yeah, for the mom, like she can do that, for the, whatever context that's in. And I think Titus 2 is a really good chapter for people wanting to like dig into that more. It just basically talks about how the older men teach the younger men, the older women teach the younger women. And I don't think that's specifically talking about age, although I think that is a factor, but just spiritual maturity wise, like the more mature spiritually, men and women teach those that are less mature. So I think that's a good church-wide model for disciple making. Okay, you're mature. You're growing in maturity. Obviously, we're never fully mature, right?
Especially you, but
trust me, I know spiritually and physically, I'm a child of God.
So taking people who are more mature, growing, but more mature, and then saying who is less mature around you. So whether that's your neighbor, someone you work with, a new believer that you met at church, a guy in the youth group, same for guys and girls, but just who are those that are less mature that you could help grow and like help them grow onto maturity. Yeah. And like literally anyone can do that, and it's awesome.
For sure. All right, Robbie. So during orientation week, I saw this graph that was one of these ministries came in and they put a graph up and it had to do with the gospel, life, and love. It was like a Venn diagram of like 3 circles. It's talking about this is what happens if you don't have, let me back up. If you have life and you have love, but you don't have the gospel, you're powerless. If you have the gospel and life, but with no love, you're legalistic. If you have love and the gospel but no life, it's probably like shallow. I think. Yeah. Okay, that's what I was going with. And I see that applied to like discipleship. If we look at what we're doing, I think is what most common. Like, and I'm not trying to dog on, oh, you're just teaching Sunday school. We're not making really disciples here. No, that's setting up pillars. Like those are important pillars for teaching the church. But when it comes to like, all right, I see a guy and I see so much potential for him to follow Christ, and I'm saying I'm just like overly spiritual. But I see where he just needs a little accountability in his life. Or like me just being here on Sunday morning, he doesn't know what it really looks like to share the gospel, to follow Christ. All these little bitty things of the day-to-day, like what it takes, what people have shown me by the grace of God, And so what he's missing in his life is my life. You know what I mean? In a sense, not just mine just because, it's my life. But somebody to do life together. And that's kind of like a common phrase. Oh, you got to do life, you got to do community.
Life on life.
But that's kind of what you're hitting at here. Like we have love, we have the gospel, hopefully in a lot of these churches, but we just need to give a little more life. We need to be, another buzzword, intentional. I feel like it's thrown around, but it's like the only word that fits it. We have to be more intentional with our relationships. And like I brought up, what I just like compliment you on is being intentional with this time that you could easily take just to do by yourself. Oh, I can go work out by myself. I can go fish by myself. This is my time away. Like the baby's taken care of. Work is over there. I just need to get away for a second. It's like, you know what? I'll live if someone else comes alongside me, and how much more can they gain just spending an hour with me and like just hearing what's going on in their life, and more just, check up on, you making it, brother, but like taking a step forward and not just maintenance and defense on the spiritual life, but a little bit of offense. How's your walk with Christ going? And really asking some questions that make you think and stuff. So I think that's super awesome. If I wanted to start, like I'm hearing all this maybe for the first time if I'm listening right now, or maybe I've heard this thrown around and it's like, okay, I've heard that. I know I need to make disciples. What does that mean? And we're kind of throwing around a lot of things. But if I wanted to start making disciples tomorrow, like I'm fired up right now listening to this, what would you tell me would be the first thing I'd do? There's a few things, but what would be like the first thing you think I should start with?
Very first thing?
Of course, everybody's coming from a different place, so I know it's kind of hard just to throw a label on it.
Yeah.
But what would you just generally say?
Well, this is not supposed to sound like the really spiritual answer, although it is, but I would say to pray.
I know you're going to say it.
I know.
I'm glad you said it, though.
Well, and the reason I say that is because it was the first thing Jesus did. When he is in Mark 3, if you go back and look, he had a big group of disciples, people that would come and hear him, follow him around. And then it says he basically went, and it's in Luke and in Mark, but it talks about how he went away for like a whole night and prayed. And then he went back and selected the 12. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say start with prayer is just ask God, who is someone that I could invest my life in? Mm-hmm. And just pray that every single day. And I think God wants to answer that prayer. I think that's a prayer he consistently answers to those that ask is, if I'm sure if you thought about it, people's faces and names would pop into your mind right now. But even if that wasn't the case, I think if you started praying for, God, who is someone that I could invest my life in, that I could teach, that I could spend time with, that I could, just get together and read the Bible with, I think he would start to bring people into your life that you could do that. So I'd say that'd be a good place to start, and then just start small, like get together with that person and say, hey, let's read through the Gospel of John, one chapter a week, and let's, talk about what we observe. Like, what does Jesus say? And then how can we imitate Jesus in our lives? How can we apply that? That's really, I think all we're talking about, especially starting out, is just finding people who may not know as much as you, or may not be living it out, spend a lot of time together, center it around the Word, and just do that for a long time. Right.
There's a lot more principles that you can dive into, that you can learn. You can really narrow this down, but we're just like a brushing over it pretty broadly. And like, y'all at Downline, before we came into it, y'all gave us like summer reading. Never thought I would actually complete summer reading.
Like summer school.
But the book was only like a quarter of an inch thick. Yeah. I almost didn't get through it. It was tough, man. But y'all gave us two. One was What is the Gospel? The other one was Discipleship by...
Yeah, Discipling by Mark Dever.
9 Marks Ministries. So discipling. And I remember on the front cover there in a little circle, it just had discipling in the top heading, and then there in the circle it said helping others follow Christ. And I think that's the best way to define it, is you're helping others follow Christ. But you might be listening to this and you're like, I need help following Christ. And what would you say to somebody that's kind of from that perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think if that's where you are, if you're like, I need help, that's the best place to be, because chances are if you're hearing this, you can probably find someone that if you walked up to them and said, hey, I feel like I need a lot of growth in my life. I want to make disciples. I don't really feel like I'm ready, or I'm equipped, or I know enough. Will you help me grow? Like, if you, like, people in ministry, especially, really anyone with a heart for disciple making, but, we long for people to say that to us, because it's, that's essentially someone that's hungry, that has a fire lit underneath them to grow. And I guarantee there will be people that will want to help you do that. And then you can start to take whatever they teach you and just turn around and start teaching that to other people.
Yeah. And there is also a balance too, because I think of a lot of people come to mind that have not had like a formal discipleship relationship, or they sat under a good Sunday school teacher. They were friends, but there was none of this, hey, let's get in the Word every Friday morning. You know what I mean? You come over to my house, see how I love my wife, all this stuff. But like, if you need to come to the point where you can feed yourself. And if you need that guidance, if you really have a lot of questions and just too many questions to Google every day, like, probably the most effective thing and time-saving thing and efficient thing is to go reach out to somebody in your church, most likely older, and like you just said, and reach out to them and say, hey, I have a bunch of questions. I just, like you just said, I want to grow. Like, can you help me? And I think hopefully they say yes. You know what I mean? Like,
just don't overcomplicate it. That's my biggest thing with disciple making, is just keep it simple. And just say, hey, will you help me grow in my faith?
Would you have any, I would say, advice for somebody that I don't know why you were just so done with this question before I even got it out of my mouth.
No, this is awesome.
My question feels unworthy now. Do you have any advice for somebody wanting to start out making disciples? I mean, you just kind of give me the first next step, pray, but what would be just general advice, simple advice, broad overview as you begin on this for the person wanting to start to investing their life and have intentional friendships with people to influence them towards Christ?
I mean, I think just trying to get as much, discipleship training as you can. So there's a lot of, I would say, I guess, curriculum out there, but just someone that can help you grow in a vision, deeper vision. You always need to be like learning more. Like we never reach a point where we learn enough. So, just listening to talks on the Great Commission or how to make disciples. Like get a few people that you really trust and like just learn a ton from them, whether that's sermons or online, stuff. Like there's just so much out there like that's available. So always have, continue to grow yourself and then just make a plan for disciple making. Like I always think if I'm trying to disciple one, I'm always thinking, where are they going? And then what's the next step?
Right.
So just keep it simple. Where are they? Okay. They need to learn how to get in the word for themselves. Okay. Where do we want them to go?
Right.
Self-feeder from the word. What's the next step? Well, hey, maybe we get together and we read a passage and I, show them 3 questions to ask or something,
right.
But just kind of mentally think through where is this person and where do I want to take them? Right. And then you can, before you can disciple 10 people, you got to disciple 1. So just start small and then, see what God does.
And my last question, just because I'm a big, I want to know the why. I'm like big picture. You talk about this thing, invest in your life sounds kind of like spiritual mentorship. Maybe I haven't been so good about it, or what's the big deal if I don't do it? They're coming to church, they're still going to Sunday school, but you did kind of raise my eyebrows raised when you said, well, Jesus spent 85% of his time with only 12 guys. It's like, why did Jesus do that? Yeah, he did preach to crowds, but why is this? I'm going to say the most effective, because if you go off the book of the master plan of evangelism, this was the master's plan.
Yeah.
Why is this the most effective? Should this be this important to us?
Well, you could probably give a lot of answers, but I think, first and foremost it's the last command of Jesus. It's the only way that Jesus has given us to reach the world with the gospel. So
hold up. What do you mean? Because I can get on a plane right now and go just start sharing the gospel. But what do you mean? This is the only, investing my life in others?
Well, meaning when Jesus was here on earth, he invested strategically, specifically in 12 men. One of them would betray him, but then you had the 11 on the hill outside Galilee, and he is about to leave and go back into heaven. And he says, here's my command to y'all. Here's what I want y'all to do. Go and make disciples of all nations. And then boom, he's gone. And I can just imagine them being okay, what do we do now? And,
Did somebody get the sermon notes from that?
Yeah. But that was plan A. That was Jesus' plan A. And there is no plan B to take the gospel out to the world. Yeah. If that didn't work, then we're not sitting here in Memphis, Tennessee, 2,000 years later, being Christians, being followers of Christ.
Plan A is Peter, who just denied you 3 times, 40 days prior. You know what I mean? And so you think about us, if you feel underqualified, I'm sure they did.
Oh yeah, they were just normal fishermen, like teenagers. So, and they were entrusted with the world evangelization. So, but yeah, and from that it works. It's the command of Jesus. And then I think just it's how we respond to the gospel, being gospel driven. I think that looks like Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. I think if we have any ounce of love for Christ in us, then our heart posture is, man, I just want to do whatever it looks like to be obedient to you. And I think that starts with, loving him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, the great commandment, and then the great commission, right after that, go and make disciples of all nations.
That's awesome. Good stuff, Robbie. It's good to see how that's impacted your life, in which I'm sure it's impacted a lot of people's lives, but you got the easy take because you got on first and you got to talk about disciple making. So
hey, happy to be here. Love it.
Well, if you made it to the end of this, folks, thank you so much for listening to episode 25 of the Long Run Podcast. Well, actually, back up. Season 3, episode 2.
Boom.
I had my heading wrong on here. Just had Robby Flack on here. Robbie, where can the people find you out there on social media since you're getting into photography and all that?
Well, if you're into hunting photography,
You can check out my Instagram. That's basically all that's on there. Every once in a while, I'll have a family pic, baby pic, something like that. But at Robby with a Y, Flack, Flack.
Robby with a Y.
Yeah.
Hobby Robby. It's Hobby Lobby. I get it now.
It's been like 20 minutes.
I promise I'm not
better late than never.
Well, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts. I sure would appreciate it. And you can check us out on Spotify as well. And if you didn't watch the video portion of this, you're really missing out. You're missing Robbie's good-looking face. So check us out on YouTube. You can just search Weston Downing because we don't have official YouTube. Or you can just check all our stuff out at www.thelongrunpodcast.org. Thanks, Robbie. Got anything else you want to add?
Man, it was a pleasure. Love doing it with you.
Great. I'll just send you the invoice. We will see you next week, people. That was awesome. Good job, man. You're natural.